All right, so today's workshop is sharing information with siblings. I'm very excited to introduce you to Emily Holl, Director of the Sibling Support Project, and panelists Jacob Weschler, John Powers, Christopher Bordeaux, Kristen Bird, and Louisa Moore. Thank you all so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having us. Welcome, welcome, everyone. I'm just going to jump right in. My name is Emily Holl, and I really want to thank the Vermont Family Network for hosting this discussion today. This is such an important topic, and I cannot wait to get started. I'm going to go ahead and share some slides with you all. Can you all see my slides? John, Chris, Kristen?
Yes.
Yes, awesome. Okay, great. So let's just jump right in here and tell you a little bit about who we are, who you're going to be spending the next hour with. So I am the director of the Sibling Support Project, and we are located right outside of Seattle, Washington, where it's like almost sunny today. Amazing. We are the first national program in the entire United States dedicated entirely to supporting siblings of people with developmental health and mental health concerns. And we're a proud program of Kindring, which is Washington State's largest neurodevelopmental center. And we have a strong commitment to equity, inclusion, and belonging. We want all of the spaces that we find ourselves in with amazing people like you to be places where everyone feels that they belong. We're really committed to creating inclusive and equitable spaces where all siblings and those who care about siblings feel that this is a space for them. We do our work in a few different ways through books and talking with the media every chance we get. Our books are written largely not only for siblings, but by siblings and about siblings. We also offer direct support through Sibshops, which are workshops that are offered by the Vermont Family Network, workshops traditionally for school age brothers and sisters of kids with disabilities. We have a number of other different kinds of workshops we do, like the one today. We have an app for parents to use with preschool age siblings, and then we also have Facebook groups for siblings of all ages. So I'm glad that we're all here, but let's take a step back and think about why we're here and why we should care about and share information with siblings. I was thrilled to hear that we had over 100 people sign up for this event, and that really indicates to me that people are thinking about siblings and people care about siblings and involving siblings in conversations. But why is it so important to do that? I'm sure you all have your reasons, and I would love to hear more about those later in the presentation. But let's share what we know a little bit from the research. We know, first of all, that siblings' experiences really do parallel parents' experiences, and that anything that we can say about being the parent of a child with support needs, we can pretty much put ditto marks on for siblings. Siblings experience many, if not most, of the same issues as parents, as well as some unique concerns and opportunities of our own. We also know that sibling issues are lifespan issues. I want you all to think about this. Brothers and sisters will be in the lives of the person with a disability longer than anyone. Definitely longer than any service provider, and probably longer even than parents. Hey, this is a relationship that can easily exceed 7 decades, which is a long time. So sibling issues evolve and change over the span of the lifespan of the family and the individual. We also know that siblings spend a good deal of time together over the course of the lifespan, right? Particularly at the beginning stages of life, maybe those first 18 years, we're living under the same roof, maybe we're going to the same school, right? We have a lot of involvement with each other as siblings. Think about your own sibling experience, disability or none. You know, your family is kind of your whole world when you're a kid. And then we know that that is true really throughout the end of life when siblings, especially as we get older, have a higher level of involvement with each other. Siblings also spend quality time. And by that, I mean that siblings are 24/7 social models for the child with a disability, right? And so we want to ensure that we're thinking about the fact that siblings not only are together a lot, but the impact of that togetherness is really, really important. And then last but not least, we know that siblings really are the next generation of caregivers, that as parents age and become less available to care for adults with disabilities and eventually pass away, it's really siblings who step in to support their brothers and sisters in many, many cases. And I have lots of stats and data that support this that we can talk about another time, or you can visit our website to learn more. But we know that many siblings do step into this role in various ways and feel vastly unprepared to do so, which is one of the reasons that we are all here today to ensure that siblings really do have a seat at the table in terms of understanding the needs, the strengths, and the supports that are available to their brothers and sisters with disabilities, and that they have a voice in what role they're going to play in being part of that support picture. So next, I want to really turn this over to the real experts of this whole event, who are the family members who share the screen with me today. We have an amazing group of parents and two dads. I'm so blown away because we typically see a lot of moms in this space, but yay dads, yay Chris and John, thanks for being here. And also a mom, Kristen, not to say that moms aren't the best. We know we love our moms. And then two siblings. I'm so excited that Jacob and Louisa are here to talk about their experiences. And I really want to start by inviting our panelists to introduce themselves. And I'm actually going to ask if we could have, just for the panel discussion, could we have everyone who's not a panelist turn off their camera? And then you're all going to come back for the Q&A. But I would love to just focus on our amazing panelists. Thank you so much. We want to see your beautiful smiling faces when we finish this discussion. So let's get started. John, do you want to just introduce yourself? I'm going to ask each of our panelists to tell us who you are, where you're from, and tell us a little bit about your family member, your loved one, your person with a disability, and your relationship to that person, if you're the parent, the sibling, etc. So let's kick it off with John, because you're first on my screen.
All right. Hello, everyone. I'm John. My last name is Powers. I live in Heinsberg, Vermont, which is in Chittenden County, just outside of Burlington. My son is 6, and as he would happily say, 3/4. And he was diagnosed with spinal muscular atrophy when he was an infant. He was about 7.5 months old. He's currently in 1st grade. He is a huge fan of video games, defining himself as an expert gamer last night specifically. And he loves theater. He loves all things Star Wars, Ninja Turtles, all the stuff that I guess I would say are typically associated with young boys. And I guess as far as learning about his condition, we noticed he wasn't meeting
Oh,
major.
John, before we jump into
Sorry.
that, that's the second question.
Yes.
Are there any other siblings at home?
Yes, absolutely. We have I have a daughter who is 9.5. She's in 3rd grade.
Great. Okay. Thank you so much. Do not forget that 3/4, 6 3/4, very, very important. Thank you so much, John. And Jacob, we'll go to you next. You're next on my screen. Tell us who you are, where you're from, and about your person.
Right, so my name is Jacob Wexler. I grew up in Jericho, Vermont. I'm 25 years old. I currently live in Burlington, Vermont. My older brother, Adam, he actually just turned 28 on Mother's Day on Sunday. And he has Duchenne's muscular dystrophy. Again, he loves video games, music. So that's kind of like the biggest thing that we've been able to bond over is music over the years. Very passionate about urban planning and housing and trying to be an activist and help other people with disabilities.
Love that. Thank you so much, Jacob. And happy birthday. A lot of birthday themes coming up. So yes, thank you. And by the way, I'm also a sibling. Sometimes I tell you more about my story, but I'm also a sibling. I have an older brother who's 2 years older than I am, who has intellectual disabilities, and music was a big thing that connected us too. So I'm right there with you. Chris.
Hi there. I'm Chris Bordeaux. I also was born in Jericho, Vermont, living in Fairfax now. I've got 2 kids at home, one with ASD, originally diagnosed with PDD-NOS. They are 15 and 13, which the teenage years have their own special set of stories, for sure. especially as they're sort of close in age and are getting a little competitive with each other.
Yeah,
And
when you said their ages, I was just like crossing my fingers, like, oh boy, he's really in it. Yes,
yeah,
I'm not
yeah.
looking forward to those. Thank you so
Oh,
much, Chris. And Kristen, who's your person?
Yeah, I'm Kristen, and I am in Essex Junction, Vermont, and I have an 8-year-old. She is finishing up 2nd grade, and she has partial fetal alcohol syndrome. Her name is Juliet. She is involved in, goodness, right now it's Minecraft, Ninjago, horseback riding. I mean, a lot of things. American Girl, a little on the side. And then we do have 2 other siblings. She's the middle. So we have Kiara, who's 11, and Weston, who's 6.
Thank you so much, Kristen. A lot of video game themes here. Okay. I can see where, if you guys have a gathering, I can see what all of your people are going to be doing together playing video games. And Louisa, last but not least.
Hi, everyone. I'm Louisa. I'm originally from Cambridge, Mass. I've lived in Burlington for the last 4 years, but moving back to the Boston area very shortly. I'm the youngest of 4. My siblings are 10, 13, and 15 years older than me, so kind of unique family situation. But my sister has Williams syndrome. She's currently 40.
Thank you so much, Louisa. I am so curious now to ask the question that John, you were like 10 steps ahead of me, started to answer about how did you learn about your loved one's disability? And, you know, this is a question that I think is so interesting to hear from a parent perspective and then a sibling perspective. So as we're all listening for that, John, do you want to kick it off since you started that one?
Sure, happy to. So we first noticed with my son that around 3 or 4 months old, he wasn't meeting the major milestones physically. He wasn't rolling over, and we started the process. We went to his pediatrician, who was phenomenal. We started out doing physical therapy with him because, as he said, a lot of kids can just be slow starters, especially if they're not moving all that much when they're young, which our son was extremely colicky, and the only way he was content was to be wrapped up like a tiny little burrito. So we thought, oh, that could be it. And we noticed that physical therapy wasn't really doing it. So our pediatrician proactively suggested that we meet with neurology. We did. And as many of you know, in the medical world, things take time. And over those 3.5, 4 months until he was diagnosed, we just noticed he was physically declining, losing strength, not gaining weight. And eventually, when he was diagnosed, we had an appointment at our local hospital where we were not expecting a diagnosis. We were going in for a second opinion with neurology as well as pulmonology. And it was at about 9 o'clock in the morning. They said, well, we can tell you what's going on with him. And we were blown away to know that we would find out. And then upon finding out, neither my wife nor I had ever heard of spinal muscular atrophy. Although my initial reaction, I think, was, I know what all 3 of those words mean, and I feel like they should never be used together. And that was pretty much confirmed to us. And from there, he was admitted to the ICU for 5 weeks. And that kind of kicked off our journey. And it started out of nowhere. And then we were in it. And that same day, I looked up at 4 o'clock at the clock in the ICU room and said, oh, we have a daughter who's in preschool. Someone has to go pick her up. And off we went. And I guess that's the briefest, shortest version I could tell of our origin story.
Thanks, John. It's amazing how you remember those moments. Like you remember exactly what time of day it was, right? And we hear many parents describe this feeling of like suddenly being initiated into this club that I didn't know existed and I certainly didn't want to be part of. But here I was, right? We hear that a lot from parents. Let's see. Kristen, do you want to go next? I see you nodding. Do you want to share your?
Sure. Yeah, well, all of our kiddos came to us through adoption, and so we kind of felt like we sort of knew what we were signing up for, and we were expecting, trauma and some challenges. We got them very, very young in the delivery room for 2 of the kiddos, 2.5 weeks old for Juliet, and she, as she was developing, before she even turned 2, she started presenting with a lot of aggression, a lot of just kind of dangerous, impulsive behaviors. But, you know, she was tiny and cute and 2, so everyone just shrugged it off for a long time. And so I think that was one of the hardest things as parents, knowing like, you know, we're not exactly sure what this is, but something's not quite right. And a lot of, well, she's 2, or, well, you know, and just lots of waiting. We fought really hard, and I did a lot of reading on my own, and finally got her a referral to University of Rochester, where they have a fetal alcohol diagnostic clinic. And she was diagnosed right before she turned 6. And we even had professionals telling us, like, do you really need this diagnosis? Is it really going to help anything? And I cannot tell you how much it has helped us as her parents, and for us to be able to explain to her siblings, hey, her brain works differently. And we know that. And because of that, even though her symptoms look a lot like just behaviors, it's actually differently wired brain. So for us, it was a huge helpful thing to have something to kind of hang our hat on. But we've had that diagnosis since she was about 6. And then we have multiple mental health diagnoses that go along with that for her.
Thank you so much for sharing that. Thanks so much, Kristen. Chris, do you want to share your story about how you learned about your child?
Yeah. So my oldest, who's 15 now, at the year milestones and some of those around talking and walking, we just weren't hitting those. We knew that something was off. We dealt with our pediatrician, which, like John, was spectacular and very supportive. We went into the CDC for the ASC evaluation and came back with knowledge of how to move forward, I guess is the best way to say it. Actually, we were given the diagnosis and a package of tissues at the same time, and we were like, no, thank you to the tissues. We just want to know how to deal with what we're dealing with here. And that was surprise to some of the folks that were giving us the diagnosis at the time, which is good. So, and that was just about when his little brother was about to be born. So we had the diagnosis around the same time as the arrival of the second child.
So he was about 2. I think are they 2 years apart?
They're 21 months apart. No, we're not.
Okay.
We started at about 13 months, having the discussions with the pediatrician and the CDC.
Got it. Thanks so much, Chris. All right, let's switch the focus now to the siblings. Jacob, let's start with you. How did you learn about? Yeah.
So my brother was diagnosed with Duchenne muscular dystrophy when he was 3 years old, which was right around the time that I was born. So it was kind of, I just grew up with it. So I was kind of like, my parents always described him to me as just like he was a little more delicate. He needs more help. He needs more attention. And I could like definitely see that there was like differences between myself and him, and that like he couldn't move around as fast, couldn't get around as quickly. But the moment that I like really like kind of hold where I feel like I fully understood it was through this movie called Darius Goes West, about a individual named Darius who has Duchenne muscular dystrophy, and his life dream was to get his wheelchair on MTV's Pimp My Ride to get it decked out. And so I remember watching that with my family, I think when I was 12 years old, and it kind of really like lays out everything about the whole disorder and what goes along with that. And so yeah, that was kind of the moment that I feel like I had like realization of everything that was going on.
Thank you so much. And it sounds like your parents were kind of open and talking with you about your brother's condition.
Yep. Yeah, so my parents were
Ongoingly.
always super ongoing, and like my mom, she works for Vermont Family Network, so she kind of has always, at least for most of my life, has been able to like work with other families, and I feel like she's very, very good about being able to kind of like describe the process of how people go about life, really. So
That's great. Thank you so much. And Louisa, so your sibling is also older, but your situation is a little bit different because your sibling's much older. So
Yeah.
tell us about sort of your journey and understanding
Yeah,
their
it's
disability.
a very unique story, I think. Yeah, my parents were in their mid 40s when I was born. And so by the time I came around, they had, 10 plus years of processing time and, accepting and learning to live with my sister's diagnosis. And same for my two brothers. So I feel like I don't really know exactly at what age. I knew that my sister was different and had differences than myself. But I do have this very formative moment of being in the car with my mom, and she was like, "You need to be a little bit nicer to your sister because here are all the challenges that she's been through in life, and here's kind of what her diagnosis is and what this means." And that was a really moving and, as I said, very formative moment in my life. And I think that was probably, around 8 or 9 years old. And then I guess continuing on, kind of continues to learn about her diagnosis and what that means for our family ongoing as all of us age and move into adulthood and beyond.
Yeah, thank you. I was going to ask how old you were when you had that aha moment. And it's so interesting because, for parents, you all were adults when you learned about your child's disability. And so you had sort of life experience as an adult or up to that point, right? And it's always striking to me that, siblings, we're learning about our brothers and sisters' disabilities from a child's perspective. And so to hear Louisa and Jacob both say, we talked about it, we were open about it, which is like leaps and bounds ahead of so many families who don't know how to talk about it. We have some great questions that were submitted to us before this event about how do we talk about this. So the fact that you guys were talking about it is incredible, and like major thumbs up to your parents. And also, you were still kids, so it's just so interesting that you both say we talked about it, but it didn't really click. It didn't really sink in until like this moment. Um, and so I just like to point that out because I think that sometimes we as parents forget that, our kids are sort of learning about this from the perspective of someone who doesn't have as much life experience and not as much of a sophisticated understanding of the world, right? So I want to ask the parents actually now, how have you talked about disability with your other kids? Kristen, you sort of already started to talk about this a little bit. So what have discussions been about? And I love the fact that Kristen, you described like observable behavior that the kids can relate to, because especially for young kids, everything is about what they can observe. So it's about like routine and behavior that they can observe. And so when you say, oh, your sister, she thinks differently, she learns differently, she whatever, fill in the blank differently, it's all related to things that they can understand and observe, which is a really, really great way to explain disability to a young child. Do you want to say anything else about sort of like your approach to communication about the disability in your family?
Yeah, we kind of got confronted with this over and over again, kind of more assaulted with it, just because Juliet's level of behavioral need was so severe. So we were constantly having to put the siblings in a place where they could be safe, because her behavior would escalate. So we were forced to talk about it a lot sooner than maybe I even was ready to explain. And I guess one of the tricky pieces would be that, when she was really escalating, Weston was 3 and 4, and how can you really explain, all of this to them? And I guess the other piece that's tricky is, fairness, right? Because they're kind of close in age, and we can't have the same expectations for Juliet that we can for the other two. But we've had to make accommodations and figure that out. So our approach has been, and I feel like they're starting to connect it now. Hey, she has different needs. Her brain works differently. And so they're starting to accept some of that. But also, all of my kids have some level of neurodivergence going on. So we have stuff for the whole family, like sensory stuff, fidgets, stuff that are transition aids, a playroom that they can utilize, so that it's not like it's all about Juliet being different. It's that we all have our unique needs. This is one way in which we will keep you safe from those dangerous behaviors, but also, isn't it interesting that all of our brains are wired differently and we all have needs that we can meet in different ways? So that's sort of how we've approached it.
I love the fact that that's how you approach it. I mean, we're constantly saying here at the Sibling Support Project, we believe that all needs are special. That term special needs, which kind of sets people off in different directions and different ways. And we really try to emphasize, no, ability is on a spectrum for all of us. Like we all have things that we're good at and not so good at and need help with. So I love the fact that you position it that way. And I love the fact that you talk about fairness and expectations. This is something that comes up a lot for siblings and parents who are worried about the whole equity issue in their family. And I like the fact that you talk about, well, we don't set the same expectations for Juliet, but that doesn't mean we don't have any expectations for her, right? Recognizing that fairness is such a big deal, especially for kids. Fairness is everything. I mean, think back to when you were a kid, you know, fighting with your own brothers and sisters about fill in the blank, you know, any number of things. So thank you for sharing that. Who wants to answer this question next about how have you talked about maybe one of the parents?
I'll go
Chris?
next. Yeah, I'll go next. We, from the very beginning, as I said, the second son came just as we were finding out the diagnosis of the first. So it has always been an open dialogue, especially when it comes to things like the differences. We have used examples from Spider-Man and Superman being really odd individuals to using just household items of this is a toaster and this is a hair dryer. They could both heat bread, but the world is designed for one to do and one to do something else. And it's not the fault of either one of those things that the world is designed for those to do that, but this is how they work. And we as individuals have a lot of those special, unique qualities that drive us. And just because some may provide challenges, that doesn't mean that it's any less worthy than the rest.
Wow, I love that.
I can say all these things with big words because they're now teenagers, you know.
Yeah, well, and the toaster and the hair dryer.
Yeah,
that's incredible. I feel so hopeful with the younger generations now because I feel like more families are sort of having these kinds of conversations and positioning ability in this way, and you know, pointing out that the world is a place in which, you know, these barriers or ideas are created. It's not the hair dryer's fault. It's not the toaster's fault. It just is the way the world is. So, and I think I think that world is changing. So that's awesome. Thank you. John, what about you? How have you talked about disability or the diagnosis in your family with your other kid?
For us, honestly, it kind of came up organically / was forced upon us organically. We are and we're very fortunate that we're a family that was always able to have almost always able to have dinner together. And honestly, one day, like the day of our diagnosis, I picked my daughter up and her brother was in the hospital and he was only 7 months old. We weren't going to leave him there overnight. So my wife was there with him. And we've tried to normalize it as best as possible, I guess. Cognitively, he is right there with her. His biggest issues are from a physical standpoint. So there's really been a lot of, I mean, just she was there with us in the hospital. We've tried to keep it age appropriate. And again, she was 3, so she's not the younger sibling, but for the majority of her memory, this has been what's going on, to the point that when she was 3-4 years old, she would talk about how the nurses she had when she was a baby, which she just assumed that that's how life was for babies because that's what she grew up her younger brother being with her younger brother having. So, you know, we've tried to be open with it while also keeping an eye to the fact that she's a little kid. And we try to keep, we absolutely have expectations for him as well as her. We talk a lot about how the way he does things just looks differently. He's gotten into adaptive sports. We're a big skiing family and she skis and he's been able to ski with us the last couple of years. It looks different, but he does it. And it's really, sometimes we've had to actually kind of remind her that he does have some, I guess I would say limitations, even though I really don't like that word, that he's not as strong as her, that he is a little fragile when it comes to stuff like that with low muscle tone. But really, we've just tried to involve her in everything as much as we can and be as open and honest with her as possible, while also respecting the fact that we are decades older than her with infinitely more life experience.
Right, right. Thanks so much for sharing that. I'm curious, I want to turn it back to the siblings now, to Jacob and Louisa. Were there times growing up, because it sounds like you grew up, both of you, in families where, like communication was very open. Were there times, however, when you did feel hesitant to ask questions or to maybe talk about your perspective, emotions, thoughts, that maybe weren't 100% great? Like, were there topics that you felt hesitant to bring up or ask questions about? Especially if it was about your own well-being and your own feelings about the fact that here's this person in our family who, we understand it, we get it, we're all different, we accept that, and they do take up an awful lot of time and attention.
Yeah, so specifically, like for me, like my older brother is 3 years older than me, so we pretty much grew up together. And so a lot of our family vacations were kind of based around hospital visits, whether we were going down to like Philadelphia or Florida or whatever. So it was like I felt like for me, it was sometimes kind of like, oh, like why are we going here? Or what is like all of this? Or like having to spend half the vacation like in a hospital. Like it was definitely, I think that it was definitely like a little difficult to talk about some of those things, just kind of like, why is my vacation, like why are we not on the beach or something? Like it was definitely like a learning process, but like as we continued to do so, like it still just kind of kept being what it was, and like that was the norm. So like I feel like maybe for me it was a little more difficult to talk about how I felt about those things, but it just kind of like felt normal almost, so it always just kind of like go along with that. So
Yeah. I mean, the words hospital and vacation usually don't go together. At least you hope not. So it would be completely understandable, I think, for any kiddo to be like, I don't want to spend my vacation in a hospital, right? And that can be really hard for siblings to say. And I think it's really important for parents to kind of note that just because the other child or other children aren't saying something doesn't mean they don't have feelings about it that maybe could be asked about and validated. Like, do you think that would have made a difference if your parents had said, Jacob, I know that this is not like probably the number one way you want to spend your vacation. I'm sorry about that, but we're gonna make sure this part of it is super fun to kind of make up for that. Like, do you think
yeah,
that would
so
have
I feel
made a
like they
difference?
did a good job of like balancing it for sure. Like it was like I remember one time, probably around the age of like 10 or so, we went down to like Disney World or Land or whichever one's in Florida. And
World.
so like yeah, so we were kind of able to like have a good balance of it. Like, okay, like these days we're gonna do this, and then like the other days, like Adam has to be up at the hospital. So like if you're up there, like we'll try and find some stuff for you to do, like because generally both my parents would like to go to like all the visits. So but there's definitely a lot of them that I also like just like sat in on, and so had to be there for.
Right. Kind of along for the ride. That's the way
Yeah.
I've heard a lot of siblings describe it. Yeah. Thank you for sharing.
Mhm.
Louisa, what about you? I mean, because yeah, your situation is so different, but were there so when you're, 8 or 9 years old and your mom is having this conversation with you, like, you really should be a little bit nicer to your sister. Were there either that time or other times where you felt like, I'm like not really that happy about the situation, but I can't say anything, or I have questions, some things are not adding up, but I don't feel comfortable asking those questions? Was there anything like that for you?
Yeah, definitely. And I'm sorry, my dog is barking in the background, so I apologize for any extraneous noise. Yeah, I'm definitely, everyone in my family is more shy and introverted, and though we're very close and open with each other, I think we don't necessarily talk about kind of the different feelings that we're feeling. And so I remember growing up and having like really a wide range of feelings about what it meant to be a sibling, from, I love my sister and I hope she brings a lot of joy in my life, but at the same time, sometimes when we're out and about, with her diagnosis with Williams syndrome. She has this sort of cocktail party personality. She's super curious. She asks people a lot of questions. And, that was embarrassing to me sometimes. I feel like this makes me uncomfortable. And I also had times where, my parents really tried hard to make her feel included in our activities. So if I wanted to do something with my mom, often she'd come along with us. And so I didn't really ever feel comfortable saying, hey, mom, like sometimes I want to do something just the two of us and not have to include her all the time. And yeah, I think for a long time, I'd kind of bury those emotions and not really talk about them too much. And really it wasn't until adulthood when I actually read that Sibshops book that I think you had mentioned at the beginning, where they have this series of like all the emotions that basically siblings express feeling. And that was really moving for me to realize like, it's okay to feel embarrassed sometimes. It's wonderful to feel joy and happiness and every emotion in between, and that it's totally normal. So I had wished that I had, maybe some of that insight at a younger age and that I didn't learn that later in adulthood. But yeah, a lot of feelings for sure.
Absolutely. I'm glad you mentioned embarrassment because that was a question that someone actually submitted before this talk. And they said like, how could I handle, my older child being embarrassed by the behavior of their younger child who has autism? And, first of all, we talk about how embarrassment is really a natural developmental stage for all of us. Like, I think all of us, disability or not, we have all been mortified to be seen with our family at one point or another, right? Like, especially when we're maybe 13-ish years old. So the embarrassment is really, really, typical, and it is a phase and it will pass. And there are situations like the one that you described, Louisa, that are like genuinely embarrassing. And I think the most important thing that a parent can do in that situation is to validate our feelings, to say, you know what, yes, like when your sister does her thing, X, Y, or Z, like we not only do we get why it's embarrassing for you, but sometimes we're embarrassed too, so that we don't feel not only, embarrassed, which is not a fun feeling, but also wrong for feeling embarrassed. Right. It can be such an important thing to validate that. Okay. So the last question I want to ask you guys before we open this up to questions. And if you're in the audience listening, watching, feel free to type your questions into the chat for our panelists. We do have some questions that were pre-submitted that we can answer, but please put your questions in the chat. We're going to spend the last 15 minutes doing that. But I want to flip the switch now and look to the future. So all of your loved ones, your people, your person with disabilities, we have a pretty wide age range, which is great. I want to ask you, when you think about your future as a parent, as a sibling, and your loved one's future, what do you think about? What are the first things that come to mind? Your hopes, your dreams, your worries, your fears?
I worry about
Chris?
independence. I'll answer that. I really worry about independence when there's not this foundation that we've built around my son with ASD. What happens then?
I think I would agree with Chris with that. Probably from a different perspective. Independence for our son looks differently because of his physical limitations and the amount of dependence he has on us as caregivers, and the physicality, the toll that it takes on us, which I would do it 7 days out of the week happily with no complaints, but it's a lot. And there's a lot of dependence that the uncertainty of the future as we get older is really the biggest thing for me.
I kind of agree with like all of the uncertainty. It's kind of like I'm 25 trying to figure out what I want to do with my life, and I know I should be out like living my life and doing whatever, like carefree, but there's always like something in the back of my mind. It's like, well, what if I move across the country? How am I going to be able to support my parents? Like I know it's a lot on them, and as they're getting older, just kind of like that, like people have said, like the uncertainty and kind of like how that support network, like that my parents have built, like if they're not there, then someone has to be there. Someone has to be with him just about like 24/7. So it's just a lot of like anxiety and kind of like uncertainty and like how do I go about doing all the things I want to do while also still being able to support my brother and my parents like at the same time.
I'll echo a lot of those feelings as well. I feel like I've had a lot of fear about the future, especially since my parents are now they're in their mid-70s, and kind of like what comes next. And I've really tried to encourage them to like tell us their plan, because I know they've put some plans in place. And they're like, oh, we'll have a big conversation as a family. But it's always kind of like, we'll do it later when we're less busy. And as we all know, life happens and you can't predict things. And so I feel like I'm trying always to encourage them, like, let's have this conversation sooner or today. And it doesn't have to be a big thing right in this moment, but, you know, having some insight. And I definitely echo, like, my brothers are in the Midwest and in the South. So, you know, and my parents are in the Boston area. So kind of whose responsibility does this fall on, and what does that mean? And how do we handle this financially, medically, all of those things. So a lot of fear, uncertainty, and trying to encourage my family to have those conversations.
Yeah, I think I would say exactly what everyone else has said. And I think with Juliet, her diagnosis is so invisible to someone that doesn't have the papers in front of her. And so I see, you know, impulsivity and decision making that might not be thought through, and then long-term consequences that could follow that, you know, quick to get angry, and then issues with the law, like those kinds of things. And I don't want the siblings to get saddled with those kinds of things, but are there mental health systems in place that can support her when she has a normal IQ and she has some skills? That's the stuff that feels very muddy to me, and I have a few years to kind of figure this out, but it's overwhelming to think about for sure.
Yeah, thank you all for sharing. I want to follow that question up with a question about what conversations have you had in your families? And so, Louisa, you talk about, oh, you know, I encourage my parents, like, we need to all sit down and talk about this, and who's going to pick up which pieces of it, and what's the vision. And we just, you know, we can't seem to find the time. So, so what have conversations looked like in your families? And some of you have really young kids, so you're, you know, you're maybe not thinking immediately about, you know, the things that like maybe Louisa is thinking about, or maybe Jacob is thinking about, you know, in his mid-20s, kind of, you know, launching into adulthood for both him and his brother. And Louisa, with her parents being so much older, and her siblings being so much older. Um, what conversations have you had as a family? And if you haven't had those conversations, what do you think the barriers are? Why not?
I think we haven't really had many of those conversations yet in our household, and I think a lot of it is we know that our daughter and our son, obviously, they're both growing up a lot faster because they have to, because of life. And really, like at this point, given their young ages, especially with our daughter, right now we don't want her to feel any added pressures. We want her to, and our son as well, obviously, experience life as naturally as a 9-year-old girl can. And we don't want her to, part of it's we don't want her to feel burdened or resentful in the future. And we want to just keep her able to enjoy things and not feel overly responsible.
Excuse me, I'm going to just interrupt. This is such a great conversation. We are at 45 minutes.
Yeah, we'll wrap up this conversation and then we'll go to the Q&A. John, I think that what you just said is so important, because I think it's a reason that most parents don't have these conversations, that you don't want to burden, worry, confuse your other kiddos, especially if, you know, you're not sure what that future is going to look like. And I want to turn it back to Louisa now, who's in a situation, fast forward, you know, you guys haven't had those conversations. Do you think not having those conversations has decreased your worry at all? Or maybe not?
I guess I'd say that I remember being like in high school and feeling kind of nervous about what the future would hold and not feeling like I could really ask my parents because it feels like kind of a weird thing to think about, when you're no longer here. What does that mean for the rest of us? But I didn't need to have a big conversation, but it could have been nice to have my parents say like, we have a plan. We don't need to talk about it right now. No, we're not like planning on dying tomorrow, but like here we have plans in place and you shouldn't worry about it. I think that would have been nice. And I kind of wished I had asked and had that conversation. And so I feel now that being a little bit older, I still feel a bit stressed about it, but also feel like being older, I have more tools to be able to communicate with my parents and be open with them and say, push them a little bit in a way that I wouldn't have been able to. And I think as they're getting older and thinking about what they want to envision the end of their lives to look like, it's kind of a natural conversation to also think about how to prepare for us taking responsibility for our sister and what that means. So in some ways I feel more stressed, in some ways I feel less stressed. I guess I don't think about it on a day-to-day basis though, but I'm appreciative that my family has been relatively open about this.
Yeah.
So that helps.
Yeah, thank you. And I'll just ask you, Jacob, real quick before we turn it over to Q&A, because you use the word anxiety, like you talk about how you feel anxious about the future. Has not talking about it helped that anxiety, or what impact has the communication had on the anxiety?
So I think that we haven't specifically had like a big like conversation like long term down the road. Like I think we kind of are all on the same page that we kind of are in the long term stage right now. Like my brother is living with my parents, and like that's kind of like what it's gonna be. And he's discussed about like trying to find his own place, but like there'd be a lot of challenges with that. And all in all, probably is not super realistic. Um, but I think that kind of like we've been able to have like almost an ongoing dialogue through it, like not necessarily like long term, but kind of like short term almost. Like it'll be like when things come up, kind of like how are we gonna go about this? And like it's convenient for me. I live close to my parents, so like I can go home and help them, and like I'm like able to like go home during lunch or something and like make my brother lunch if both my mom works from home and if my dad needs or if nobody's able to be there. But I do think that kind of not knowing what's gonna happen is just like obviously the uncertainty of life just kind of like brings that anxiety on. And I don't think that it was specifically related to like having a like kind of like long-term plan or not. I think it's just kind of like the uncertainty of like what is going to happen in the future.
Sure. Yeah, thank you. And that's why when we talk about future planning, we emphasize with families, it has to be fluid and flexible and ongoing, because life throws curveballs all the time. So thank you guys so very much. I really so appreciate you being part of the conversation up to this point. I think Emmy's going to jump back in and take it away.
Thank you, Emily. Yeah. Again, to the panelists, I know as a parent of siblings, one of course who has some needs. This has just been so incredibly insightful. I'm so grateful for your candor and your transparency and your honesty. I'm so grateful. Before we get to other questions, which I see one or two here in the chat that I would like to share, we need to take a short pause here just to ask everybody in the room to complete the evaluation for this workshop. This is actually really important for us here at VFN because this enables us to make improvements to fulfill our grant requirements so we can continue to foster these kind of engaging conversations and this kind of wonderful community work. So please see the link in the chat there. And take a minute now. It shouldn't take long at all to complete that for us, please, so we can quickly jump back in to more good stuff and a few questions before we all depart. Thank you.
And I think while folks are filling out that survey, I don't know if Emmy, you want to turn your camera back on. If other folks want to turn your cameras back on, come on back to us, everyone. We've missed you.
Thank you very much. Yeah.
Yeah, of
I
course.
really, it was nice though to do that because I was able to kind of naturally put my attention on the panelists. So thank you for that. I appreciate that. Okay.
Absolutely.
And I think we've given enough time. As you're wrapping up your survey, please continue to do so. And then let's just jump back into the questions because I know we have to be respectful of everybody's time and we could probably all be here for another hour, but unfortunately we can't. So Emily, I wanted to get to this one question that we had that was noted earlier, and that was actually from a parent. And that was, do you have any, how do you avoid overwhelming the adult sibling while still encouraging involvement and communication?
Yeah, absolutely. I want to actually invite Louisa and Jacob to answer that question first. So, so how to involve you guys in conversations about the future planning, service planning, caring for your sib without overwhelming you.
So I think that my parents have done a really good job of respecting the fact that I'm in my 20s, want to go do things, have all these things going on. But they just like they give me a good heads up, like, hey, like we may need some help like on this date. Like, will you be able to like come by and like hang out with Adam for a little bit? Or like, hey, like, can we like meet you somewhere and like you guys go to the concert or something. So it's just kind of been like open communication has been really big and just like not really like throwing things onto me. And like obviously like I want to be involved, like I deeply care for my family. So it's like I think a lot of it is kind of like if you try and like constantly try and be like push things onto like the siblings, then like that might almost push them away a little more. Whereas like my parents kind of let me come into it on my own. Whereas like in high school and like growing up, I would like help with like all sorts of different things. So it was something I was used to. But also like I want to be able to like be there for my parents and like help them. So it's just like open communication really is the biggest thing that I think, and just like like timing and communication, like not just throwing things onto the siblings. It's good to like kind of have a plan if you can, and just kind of like be able to like plan out in advance a little bit.
I love that, Jacob. And when I hear you talk, I hear the word choice, 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 right? Like it really feels like a choice.
Yep.
It's a question, it's an invitation, it's not an obligation. I think that's
Yeah,
so key.
absolutely. So like I never felt like my parents were making it like an obligation for me to like be there. They're like, hey, like we want to go do this thing. Like if you're free, can you do this? Like so. Yeah.
Thank you. Louisa, do you want to add anything to that from your perspective?
Say very similar. You know, my parents been open with me, and I think kind of chipping away at those like little conversations about either the future or different things. I guess the nature of my sister's disability is that she lives with my parents, but is relatively independent, and she took her a while to find a job, but she has a job that works well for her, and so she's able to kind of go out into the community and do this job and come back home. So, you know, my parents don't require a ton of help from me or my brothers, but kind of being able to come home sometimes and be a friend and a sister and provide more community, because I think it's really hard for my sister to be 40 years old and living at home with parents. And then, you know, my siblings and I are off living life and have careers, and my brothers are married and have children. So I think being able to come back, and my parents don't necessarily ask me to do that, but it was kind of something you just see happening. And so again, a lot of choice there, and open communication and sort of talking about it little by little is really good.
For sure. And I love also, you know, that highlights that um when we think about, you know, helping out and supporting, it's not like it all needs to fall on one person. It's like when I hear you talk, Louisa, it's like I can, first of all, my parents don't assume that because I'm off living my life, I don't care. You know, I do come back. And the best way for me to support my sister is by offering her that friendship and companionship that she doesn't get. Like that's the best thing I can bring to this picture. Right. You know, when we talk about future planning, it's like when we did future planning for my family, nobody wanted me to handle my brother's finances. No offense taken, but like I am not the financial wizard in the family. So that piece of it I don't do, right? It's like we all have the things that we bring to the picture, we all have our strengths. So yeah. And then the only other thing I would add to that for parents is, don't assume that silence is disinterest. And I think I said that earlier. Um, Asking those open-ended questions, invitations, not obligations, and kind of those open-ended questions about like, hey, like when you think about this, what do you think, or what do you see, or what is this like for you, or I've been thinking about this for your brother's future. Do you have any ideas or thoughts? So that it's not, I think sometimes we as parents worry so much about, we kind of project our own worries onto our kids when we're asking the question. And then that makes us really afraid to ask the question because we're thinking about these big, heavy, deep things. And if we just ask an open-ended question, we might discover that our child is, thinking about something completely different and something completely valid and important, that only adds positive things to the picture. So open-ended questions, I think, is really, really important.
Well, thank you. Thank you all. I just wanted to note an extra appreciation that showed up in the chat for everybody. What a great conversation and vulnerability. And I think that that could be echoed for all of us here in the room. So again, thank you, Emily. Thank you to all of our incredible panelists. We are so grateful for all of you. This is a great conversation. And again, all of your input and your presence is so appreciated. I just wanted to make note that we have many more interesting workshops that are coming up, and you can find details about those on our homepage, the website, vermontfamilynetwork.org, along with the links to the previously recorded ones, and this will live there as well. We have tons of information on our website, and getting connected with us is easy, so you can follow us on Facebook or join our closed Facebook page if you are a parent. We have 2 closed groups, one for all parents of children with disabilities, special health needs, and then also one for those with adult children as well. And you can also sign up for our monthly e-news or check out our YouTube channel. We're here to help. Please contact us by phone or email. And thanks again, everyone. Have a wonderful day. Again, thank you so much to our panelists. So lovely to have all of you here joining this conversation. Thank you so much.
Thank you.